Ojvazod Otavari, and welcome to the world building stream. How's everybody doing? I hope you're having a good Sunday. You guys missed it. There was like some crazy Fast and the Furious stuff happening outside my apartment just now. Honking, revving of engines. Somebody got out of their car and was yelling at somebody else. It was crazy. So it's quieted down for the moment, but I have not ruled out the possibility that it will come back. So be prepared. Welcome. If you've not tuned in before, this is a world building stream. We're working on Helm Crown. What's up, David? An upcoming D&D campaign that I intend to run someday when the world opens back up again. Helm Crown is a dwarven sort of kingdom building game. It's about the kingdom of Khûm, which is this ancient dwarven kingdom in my setting that fell 500 years ago to a number of disasters called the Seven Sorrows. And now, 500 years later, the dwarves are coming to reclaim that kingdom, and we're going to build a campaign all around that. Hey, what's up, UberQ? Thanks for coming. But today, we are focused on monsters. So, what we've been doing, we've done a couple of these now. You've probably seen them if you're here. But we are taking a big, long list of monsters I made that are monsters that are underground, like subterranean monsters, mountain monsters, or sort of cold climate monsters. And we are slowly redesigning them, mainly on a story level, not necessarily on a mechanical level, though we sometimes add little mechanical flourishes, just to make them kind of unique for my world. I find that the monsters are a good base block to start from, but whenever I do a new world, I always like to kind of tweak or adjust or play with monsters to make them fit inside either the cosmology or the ecology or even sometimes the politics of the world that we're working on. So we have a huge list here of different monsters. Of course, let me know if you can see me and hear me okay. I think it's okay, but obviously, let me know. But we've got all kinds of stuff. Odiugs and Oriads, Grey Oozes, Myconids, Metal Masters, all this stuff here. We've been working on 22 pages worth of monsters. Just kind of little blurbs about them. Here's the Grick, for example. But the way these streams normally work is that I will pick... I'll present y'all with the list of monsters here, whether it's the Aboleth or the Black Pudding or the Cave Bear. And we go through and we just design as many of them as we can. Usually it takes about 20 minutes to 30 minutes, 40 minutes if it's a complicated monster to kind of redesign it. Yeah, so if y'all want to look at this list of monsters and start shouting out ones that you think are interesting, I'll pick one of those from the ones that you guys suggest, and that's what we will work on. So some of these are really obvious monsters, stuff like the Aboleth or the Black Pudding, but some of them are really weird, obscure monsters from older editions. I kind of went digging in some old databases for some various different monsters. So stuff like the Taer, the T-A-E-R, I don't know if you guys can see that one. I don't even remember what that is, but I wrote it down. Or like the Yak Folk are kind of old. The Chagrin, the Geonid. These are like weirder, older ones. We have two different kinds of jellies on there, the mustard and the ochre. I will probably combine those into one. But yeah, mephits are a little simpler. We might not necessarily need to do that, but I could definitely see there being some ice mephits, maybe some magma mephits. So yeah, you guys go ahead and throw out some suggestions, and then we will get started. Last week, what did we do? We did the Rust Monster, we did the Odiug, we did the Roper. I could have sworn there was at least one more that we did last week. Let me go scroll up and see. Wasn't the Trog. Piercer and Roper we did. Odiug we did. Was it the Gargoyle? No, Gargoyle was a couple weeks ago. Ooh, David says the Xorn. That's interesting. I'm curious about the Xorn because they're kind of weird. What did we do last time? Wasn't a giant. Gargoyle, Caleb Dur, no. Flump, Durgar, Darrow. I forget. Huh. Yeah, I'm crazy. Yeah, I'm into the Jorn, unless UberQ has a different idea. So I gotta confess, I don't know my Jorn lore very well, but I do like that they would be the last alphabetically here. So let's snag these. So for those of you who don't know, this is set in the same world as my currently defunct podcast campaign, All Hail Yogg. So some of these monsters will have sort of Yogg connections to them. But I don't know if the Jorn will, necessarily. Let's start with the Jorn. Yeah, that's cool, UberQ. I'm into it. So we'll delete all the old stuff here for the troll. I have my MM right here beside me. So we will pull that up, and I will read about Jorn, because I don't know them very well. If I remember correctly, I know they're earthy type elemental creatures. They dig around. But I don't know very much about their lore. I feel like they're connected to the elemental plane of Earth, which might be a problem for us because we don't really have alternate planes as much on Dune, our setting. Everything's kind of localized on Earth. So let's look up the Jorn. I think they're in the MM. If not, we might be in trouble. Yeti, Wraith, Wyvern. Yep, the Jorn. Okay. Yep, bizarre creatures in the elemental plane of Earth. Jorn sniff out gemstones and precious metals, then tunnel through earth and stone to consume those treasures. On the material plane, Zorn must range far and wide through the Underdark to sustain themselves, becoming aggressive towards miners and treasure hunters while the valuable minerals of their diet are scarce. Okay, so kind of like gem eaters. Jorn's unnatural origins are suggested by its unusually heavy body and its large, powerful mouth sitting atop its head. Yeah, it's got like 3 arms and 3 legs, right? They call it an elemental. Hey, what's up, Christopher? You're in bed with a sleeping 3-year-old. Oh, that's very cute. They call them elementals, but looking at it, it looks like an aberration to me. You know, it's got the rocky skin, I guess. But if you look at like the 5th edition picture, you know, it's got the one eye and the big mouth. Yeah, I might have to make that thing an aberration. Elemental travelers, possessed of the power of elemental earth, a Jorn glides through stone and dirt as easily as a fish swims through water. It doesn't displace earth or stone when it moves, interesting, but merges with and flows through it, leaving no tunnel, hole, or hint of its passage. They have earth glide. Okay. Jorn prefer not to leave their home plane, where they easily eat their fill of gemstones and precious metals. When a Jorn winds up... Hey, what's up, Jose? Nice to see you. When a Jorn winds up on the material plane, whether by accident or by curiosity, or from curiosity, it seeks sustenance and a way home. Beggars and thieves, huh? Jorn scour the depths of the earth for precious metal and stones. Because they are unable to consume organic material, they ignore most other creatures. That's kind of what you were saying, David, right? However, a Jorn's ability to sniff out metals and stones often draws its attention to adventurers carrying coins and gems. Because a Jorn isn't evil, it pleads or bargains in the hope of convincing owners to give up their treasure, offering up information it has learned from its travels in exchange. A Jorn whose requests are ignored might resort to threats and bullying. If starving or angry, it resorts to force. Huh, okay. That's interesting. I don't know what to do with this, you guys. Because, like, they're neutral, right? They're not evil. So it feels like it would be weird to tie them to Yogg. But they're subterranean and they're aberrant, so they feel kind of Yoggish to me. I don't know. Oh, a lot of chat. Oh, no. Christopher, I'm sorry to hear that. About your hotel, that stinks. I hope you guys are okay. UberQ says, it seems like it would be... Oh, what's up, Vaughn? UberQ says, it seems like it would be a definite pest problem with its taste for precious goods. Yeah, it definitely could be, and I think that that's right. I feel like we have so many monsters that are, like, problems because they eat stone, right? We have the rust monster. We have, is similar to that, right? We have the Chrismal is similar to that. The gray ooze is similar to that. You know, the sword slug is kind of similar. I feel like we have a lot of these types of monsters where they're subterranean and they eat things that are precious to dwarves. So they become less You know, like they're like a pest issue. What's interesting about Zorn too, or Jorn, is that they're intelligent, right? So gosh, what do we do with the Jorn? This is a tricky one. They eat gemstones. They earth glide. They don't feel like they're natural creatures of Ondune. I can't really get there. Is there anything to the idea of like, I guess aberrations traditionally in Ondune aren't Yogg related. They're from other planes. So stuff like mind flayers are, you know, the province of another dimension. The way the sort of other planes work in Ondune is that it's basically just the far realm, right? Like you have these other entities, but each one of these other entities kind of rules its own plane. So Ondune is Yogg's plane, and it's kind of like imprisoned in the earth. So you don't have like the Shadowfell or the elemental plane of Earth, for example. You would have these other kind of realities that are ruled by these other elder evils. So Hadar is the one we establish in the podcast that is sort of in an adjacent realm cosmically. And all these other elder and like evils look down on Yogg because Yogg allowed itself to get captured. So generally, aberrations in Ondune are like vestiges of these other entities, these other elder evils that aren't Yogg, kind of creeping into Ondune. So mind flayers are a perfect example. They're kind of like the agents on Ondune of these other entities. So that's traditionally an aberration. There are some exceptions, like the Beholder doesn't really work that way. The Beholder in Ondune is just like a dude. Dude, it's just like there's one aberration. It was one Beholder, and it was sort of made during a freak cosmological event. And there's only ever one Beholder at a time, and they do that cool thing they do in Volos, where they like a Beholder exists for a certain length of time, and then eventually it envisions another Beholder that's more powerful than it. And so by thinking about it, it makes that other Beholder real. The envisioned Beholder kills the original Beholder, and now that's the Beholder, right? And that's it's in Volos. I didn't make that out, but I love that so much because it's all about like their paranoia. So there are definitely exceptions. So we could still make the Jorn an aberration and not necessarily have it be from another realm. Oh, chat's blown up. Maybe they could see the Jorn as a religious sort of beast, as goods can be traded for info, a good omen of sorts when one is mining and getting better. I kind of think, yeah, linking them to Hadar also makes sense if that's a path you want to take. I kind of like the idea of like a benevolent aberration, or like that it's like a creature that should be evil, or like otherworldly, right? But it's not for some reason. Yeah, linking it to Hadar is interesting. It's weird because they're so deep. They're in the earth, right? So it feels weird that like if Hadar is ostensibly like beyond, you know, Hadar is related to stars-ish in Ondune. A lot of stuff is stars, but like Yogg is all about the depth. So it feels like it should be in some way connected to Yogg. Let me make sure I'm not totally leaning out of frame here. How am I doing? Yeah, there, that's good. If I go here, you could still see me. Okay, so I can do this and this. I do think it's funny when I scrub back through old videos, how many of the world building streams have me like, you know, like here, where you can't see me at all, and I'm like, okay guys, what's going on? Poorly framed. There, let's make sure that's okay. Yeah, we're good. So I'm trying to think. They do eat, and Hadar is all about eating. So it could make sense that they're about consuming stuff. Could the Jorn be the creatures that create or maintain the metal that imprisons Yogg? Huh. That's really interesting. Huh. Yeah. I'm trying to process it. Yeah, okay. So that metal that you're talking about, Vaughn, is called sacristeel. Good memory, man. Good memory. So the core of the earth is made out of like a thick layer of this metal called sacristeel that is specifically sort of made by the gods to contain Yogg. So like custodians of the sacrosteel. God, that's fascinating too for a couple of reasons. Sorry, I'm like lost in thought now. So I think that's it. I think it's something like that, because that lets us use a lot of Ubercue's ideas too, that they are religious and that they are like a good omen, right? That like there's a sacred divinity to them. They were put there by the gods. They're very like unnatural looking, which is kind of cool. It almost reminds me of like Old Testament angels or something, right? How like weird and inhuman they are, that they're like wheels of fire and eyes and wings, that like the dwarves would see the Jorn. Gosh. Placed there by Ignon. So, cosmologically speaking, there was an event in what's called the Vanished Time, which is basically like sort of the pre-mortal age. So, a lot of history. Giants in Anduin were kind of the first stab that the gods made towards mortal races. They made these people and thought, okay, they will guard against Yogg's rise, right? And they all kind of inevitably fell to various vices. One of those groups, the trolls, were seduced by Yogg in an attempt to try to free it, right? So Yogg was almost freed in the Vanished Time. The gods eventually came back to Anduin after leaving it, realized their mistake, and basically took the power from the giants and gave it to mortals. People who were younger, shorter lived, you know, couldn't be as easily corrupted. So, so there was basically a period at which Yogg almost broke out in the ancient history. So it would kind of make sense if when the gods came back, they instilled someone to be a more direct custodian of that, of the sacristeel, of the shell, right? And it also kind of makes sense, the way the gods are in my world is that they are sort of like astral, divine adventurers. There are all these different realms, and they kind of hop around, this party of 6 of them, and they fight monsters and slay entities and keep moving through like sort of all the infinite different realms, right? So they come to Anduin, they see Yogg, and this time they try to contain it rather than actually kill it. So they contain it, and then they move on, and they're gone for eons. And then periodically they will come back and like check on these places. Again, think about like an adventuring party moving around the world. You know, you might clear out a dungeon and then continue on your way and not really think about that dungeon anymore. That's kind of the model I'm using for these the gods, are these kind of colonialist. They move into an area, they trap everything or fight everything, slay the demons, leave. And so here with Anduin, they tried something different. They tried trapping Yogg because they couldn't outright defeat it. Sorry, I'm on a long tangent. But the point is that the notion that the Jorn would have been creatures maybe from another reality that the gods brought in and then used as custodians. Yeah, okay. So, divine creatures, I don't think that they're like, are made by the gods. Not made by the gods, but imported. Kind of like, you think about like rabbits in Australia, right? Rabbits in Australia. After Yogg's initial attempt to subdue initial attempt to escape the earth, the gods imposed new guardians to prevent his escape. The Jorns are regarded as something like divine entities by the dwarves. Guardians of the rarest minerals. So they would only be found in the deepest levels. Charged with guarding sacristeel, but That was a long time ago. That was thousands upon thousands of years ago, right? So they could definitely have strayed from their purpose. They could definitely be, you know, not, I don't want to say corrupted. I kind of like the idea that they can't be. Like they were chosen. Yeah, they were chosen for their incorruptibility. The Xorn were chosen by the gods for their incorruptibility. What's their like language situation? I assume that as written they speak Terran, right? Because I kind of like the idea that there's like some fundamental, like, oh, there I am. See, that there's like some fundamental communication barrier between the Xorn and the dwarves. I think it's kind of cool. Yeah, David says, looking at the old Xorn stuff, in 3E calls them outsider, which are any non-elemental creature not from the material plane. Yeah, the 3E one, they're like weird frogs, right? In the 3E picture, monster manual, really like spindly arms. Yeah, they're freaky looking. Yeah, I think outsider's a good term for them, right? So I assume they just sort of speak Terran, right? Which is the like Earth language. Speak Common. Oh, they speak Common? Oh, that's kind of disappointing. We can change it, of course. Oh, language. Yeah, in the 3E one they speak. In 2nd E, it's like a fish. That's weird. In 5E, it's Terran, and I think that kind of makes sense that they're ostensibly from the elemental plane of Earth. They have like a weird butt or something in the picture here. I don't know what that is. What that's meant to be. They look very evil in this picture. They don't look good, right? Yeah, they are super old. UberQ makes the point, so there could be a language barrier. I mean, I think if they come from some other place, right? I'm trying to think of like a good analogy. Like, I like them as sort of like, what is their... Yeah, the common of millennia ago is not modern common. Yeah, that's true. Maybe... I wonder if they speak, like, root, like, language. They speak, like, the... Yeah. Some manner of language barrier between them. Is Terran the language, like the root language of Dwarven? Were they taught to speak by the Xorn? Although I think the Xorn were so deep. You know, the dwarves were kind of surface level to begin with and then went deeper. So what's their deal now, right? So they were originally basically put here by the gods as a means to protect the Sacrosteel from being broken by either Yogg or by servants of Yogg, right? As sort of a custodian of the Sacrosteel was their original purpose. Thousands of years have passed. Are they still doing it? Are they still the same Xorn? Do they reproduce? You know, what's the deal? I kind of think they feel like they would be very difficult to kill. I mean, they only CR5. How big are they? I keep closing the book. I should just leave the book open. But they feel like... they feel big to me. Maybe I'm thinking of a different monster. There used to be like a similar... like elemental plane crawling monster in the old 3rd edition book too. Called like a Delver or something like that. They're medium, so they're medium sized. I always saw them as being kind of bigger. Maybe I'm thinking of the Delver. What do they have? They have Treasure Sense. Okay. They have Stone Camouflage, Earth Glide. So Treasure Sense is interesting. 5 feet tall? That's not very tall. Taller than a dwarf, I guess. 5 feet. But, you know, it's also like a stocky, horrible alien thing. They move through stone. Well, yeah, what I can't, like, grapple...
5 feet tall.
Yeah, what I can't grapple with is the idea of like what they do now, you know? Like if they more of a bulky square, yeah, if they used to protect, do they still do that? Well, let's write some description stuff. Maybe some culture. Utterly alien. The Xorn come from another reality, another dimension. Tasked by the gods to protect the sacro steel shell. Oh yeah, these could be offshoots of the original divine creatures. That's fair. That protects the... Yeah, what if it's like they're kind of like gluttonous, right? They have since forgotten their duty and instead stalk the tunnels for gemstones. That like wherever they're from, you know, maybe they like can eat stone or whatever. They're like rock biters or something. But they have since discovered gemstones. That whatever realm they came from didn't have gemstones, right? And Ondune does, and they've kind of become addicted to them. The idea of them as like gem addicts, I think, is interesting. And yeah, maybe as UberQ says, these are like the sort of degenerate form that they've been here for so long, right? I feel like they live a really long time if they're kind of like rock people. But I think instead of actual stone, I think they have kind of like weird leathery, maybe like pebbly skin. I think is cool. Yeah, I think that's right. I think like it protects, that insulates Yogg. Yeah, with a sweet tooth. Yeah, exactly, UberQ. You're right. It insulates Yogg. Over the years, though, they've become addicted to gemstones. I think there are still some, I don't know if you guys can see that, still some Xorn that hold to the ancient ways and attempt to guard, yeah, against any incursion, but Night's Watch style, there are too few of them. Many Xorn are simply gem-hungry nomads wandering the earth and crunching on gemstones. Yeah, that like you kind of get this. This is less description and more culture. You sort of get this dichotomy of the ones that still remember their divine task and the ones that don't. I think you could also get a fair number of Xorn that would play into their divine nature, right? Yeah, I think they are I think they're distractible. I don't know that they're corruptible. I don't think Yogg can get to them. I think they were like chosen because Yogg, for whatever reason, can't exert any influence on them, right? But that doesn't mean that they can't be distracted by other things. You could argue, right, that like the gems are kind of like Yogg's hands. Maybe Yogg is populating certain areas with gems, but it's not that like Yogg can't get in there and actually corrupt them. Like incorruptible through traditional means, corruptible through traditional means. The Xorn are easily distracted with shiny things. Shiny things. Okay. What's interesting about the Xorn here too is that they would be a worldwide phenomena. They wouldn't just be in Khûm, right? I think they would be drawn. Yeah, there you go. They're drawn to Khûm, while originally meant to protect the entire sacrosteel crust. We'll say shell. Sacrosteel shell. The Xorn were drawn to Khûm in large numbers by the abundance of gemstones there. So then I think the dwarves would... Yeah, let's make a separate heading for, like, how do dwarves view Xorn? I like the idea that they can't speak traditionally or something like that. There's, like, some kind of a... Like, how, if a dwarf encounters a Xorn, how does it know that it's, like, a divine being? Like, if I was digging around... It was delving deep beneath Khûm, and I saw one of these teeth-gnashing monsters. I don't think I would immediately assume, oh, it's an angel, right? They have to have some divine providence. And I like the idea that a dwarf, that, like, any other race might look at them and be like, what the fuck is that, right? But dwarves have them kind of, like, factored into their mythology. Dwarves. I like the idea of the dwarves viewing them as being divine, even when they're maybe not so divine, right? Like, they are divine-ish. Like, the gods brought them here. But I don't think that they... I think the dwarves are too trusting of them. It's like one of the few things that dwarves trust inherently. Dwarves are perhaps too trusting of Xorn, viewing them as the messengers and guardians of the earth. A Xorn's word is seen as divine law, whereas the Xorn haven't actually had contact. Like, the Xorn are basically like mercenaries for the gods, right? Whereas the dwarves believe them to be kind of like true believers, right? Haven't actually had contact with the gods in ages. Yeah. So the dwarves are like Xorn will often demand tribute from dwarves, and dwarves are happy to pay it. And the dwarves are happy to pay that tribute. It's considered a great blasphemy to deny a Xorn. Many dwarven holds. And, like, yeah, they might get information. I think you made that point. Like, maintain relationships with them. With Xorn, both for information and for sort of piety. Yeah, that's cool. Okay. So then I think the history here is also pretty easy. So during the Seven Sorrows, when the gemstones began to fail during the Sorrows, Xorn fled in great numbers. Xorn fled Khûm in great numbers. This too was seen as a bad omen. But now the Xorn have returned to Khûm in great numbers, seeking the delicious gemstones that now grow unharvested beneath the kingdom. So the Xorn have been back for a while and, like, just conveniently didn't tell the dwarves about it, right? Like, yeah, that's cool. I kind of think that their threat, like, yeah, you could argue that it's you know, greed or eating or whatever, but, like, I think their threat is authority. While decent combatants, the Xorn pose a different threat to dwarves. Because you still kind of get that, like, con man, thief, beggar sort of a thing, where, like, you pay them off, and then they might give you some information, but they also won't bother you, right? That, like, they have this kind of vested with authority thing. They're a little like high on their own supply, right? A little puffed up with their own authority. most dwarves consider them like infallible. Infallible. And thus are easily duped by a greedy Xorn. And they're so like ineffable and uncanny that the dwarves like a Xorn could come in and make a demand of a hold. I know I need X amount of rubies, and the dwarves would pay it, and then the Xorn would be like, cool, great, I kept you safe from this threat, and then it would slink off, and it's never clear whether the dwarf actually or the Xorn actually did anything. Because the dwarves just kind of look at that and be like, oh, it's great wisdom, right? Like, that's cool. So some hooks. Let's think of 3 adventure hooks for the Xorn. A greedy Xorn is extorting a gratuitous amount of gems. Gratuitous amount of gems from a hold. That's good. Some other adventure hooks for Xorn. So they can't be corrupted by Yogg, right, specifically. But we could do something about... Oh, yeah. This is a thing I wanted to talk about. Another kind of subheading. So we have Clan Deepvein. So Clan Deepvein is one of the 6 elder clans. Well, 7 if you count True Silvers. But one of those sort of like great houses, if you will, right? If you think of the sort of Westeros terms. They're not the Targaryens, but they're sort of like the Starks or the Lannisters. They are the like most conservative, most traditionalist, most sort of like rigid house or clan. And their thing is that they kind of specifically spurn the surface. They're all about staying underground as much as possible. They view the sun and the sort of surface world as being like a fickle distraction. They believe that dwarves belong underground. Like I said, very conservative, very traditionalist. But the point is that their primary export, each one of these clans has a mineral, a magical mineral that's like their unique monopoly. Their primary export is sacristeel. They have dug the deepest out of any of the clans, and they have been for years harvesting small amounts of sacristeel, right, that they then sell because it's the most valuable, most precious metal on Earth. So this obviously brings them into conflict because they are like literally scratching at the cage that Yogg is imprisoned in. They don't really realize this. Yogg's existence is not very well understood by most of the people at this time. Once Yogg comes free in the 4th Age, then, I mean, yeah, Yogg is very obvious and very evident. But this is still kind of a conspiracy theory at this time. But my point is that if Clan Deepvein's whole thing is to mine the sacristeel, they would inevitably have to come into conflict with the Xorns. So my thought is that, like, while conflict seems inevitable between Clan Deepvein and the Xorns, the solution here is obvious. The clan generously bribes the Xorn in their sort of region, in their territory, to look the other way while they harvest sacristeel. So they specifically make a big point about collecting gems in order to feed the Xorn, to essentially leave them alone and let them do their thing, right? The Xorn are being bought off by these Deepvein dwarves. And not all of the Xorn feel great about that. Sometimes you might get a Xorn who confronts or attacks some miners, right? That, like, you'll get kind of a renegade Xorn who's not sort of towing the line, who's not on the take. So I think it's kind of cool. They sort of have like a corrupt cop sort of feel. So they're corruptible in like an interpersonal sense, but they're not corruptible in like a cosmic, magical, turn them into demons sense, right? So maybe one hook here is a Xorn secondhand corruption. Yeah, exactly. A Xorn believer asks the characters for help against Clan Deepvein, right? Because they're obviously playing with fire. I mean, you can't have a dwarven campaign and not do the too greedily and too deep thing, right? That has to be some sort of a relevant theme. And what better setting to do too greedily than too deep than one where going too deep actually unleashes the greatest evil of all, right? Let's see. Another hook for a Jorn. Another interesting story. They could get like a hanger-on, right? Like a Jorn that follows them around. You could get a Jorn that swallows a particularly important gemstone, or I want to try to tie it in with their mandate, right? Their divine duty. Oh, we kind of had that with the second hook. A Jorn who... Oh, yeah, that's cool. Gems go missing. So it's like a Jorn bandit. Yeah. Go missing from a dwarven supply chain. Actually a Jorn. A Jorn bandit. That's kind of cool. Yeah, great. Okay, that's your Jorn. It was a weird one. It took us a while to get there, but I think Vaughn had that one. You wouldn't track one down for Ancient Wisdom. That's cool. Track down a Jorn that knows some ancient secret. Yeah. They're so old, after all. Yeah, I dig it. Okay, great. That's the Jorn. Took about 40 minutes. That one was a little bit more complicated, but I think we got there. Nice. Okay, here's our list. What do we think? Obviously, we're going to burn through all the obvious ones, and then eventually it'll be like, what's a Geonid? So we might stop doing the, choice by committee after a while. But we have Aboleth, Black Pudding, Cave Bear, Cave Fisher, Chagrin, Darkmantle, Drogazar, Gasspore, Geonid, Nell Beetle, Koatua, Mephit, Mustard Jelly, Ochre Jelly, Paraton, Quaggoth, Spitting Crawler, whatever that is, a Tear, a Warg, a Winter Hag, and Yak Folk. Any preferences there? There are a few of these I have like a touch on. I know kind of what I want to do for Dark Mantles. Aboleth's sort of. Mephits I know pretty well. But that's about it. A Drogazar, sort of. Gasspore, sort of. Cave Fishers we've actually met in the campaign before, so there's not as much to do about those. But at some point it'll have to be done. What do you guys think? Go ahead and throw me a suggestion. Oh, I'm so hungry. I gotta eat something before we do these streams, because I always get these, like, super rumbly bellies. I don't want to jinx it, but it's been pretty quiet in terms of Fast and the Furious out there. Apart from that first one, it's been pretty quiet. I'm probably jinxing it now by saying that even. What do we think? Any preferences? I'm a little intimidated by all the oozes, because I have a couple of oozes. That I haven't haven't to grapple with yet. Let's see. In terms of oozes, we have. Is it just the one right now? We have the cube. We have the gray ooze. A lot of gray ooze stuff. Oh, that's it. Just those two. But like, you know, what's the difference between an ochre jelly and a mustard jelly and a black pudding? You know, the gray ooze is very Yogg focused, so I would be curious about the other ones. Really? No suggestions? I could pick it myself, but I figured you guys would have thoughts. David went for the Jorn. Uberkey went for the Jorn. I kind of want to do a weird one. I kind of want to do one that I don't know what it is already. So which ones don't I know? I don't know what a Chagrin is. I don't know what a Geonid is, or a Nell Beetle. I don't know what a Spitting Crawler is, or a Tear, or really a Winter Hag. So there's like 6 options there. I'm just going to roll. If you guys don't have an idea, I will have an idea. Let the dice decide. 6. Okay, I got the Winter Hag. All right, that's interesting. Some Fae. I feel like we don't have a lot of Fae here. Let me look up a Winter Hag and see what I can learn about it. I did one Fae creature that would work in this setting, the Cryad, for our Patreon. I feel like a Cryad could work really well in Khûm, but I kind of already know their thing because I made them up. So, Winter Hag. Winter Hag it is! Nice job, Vaughn. Winter Hag. What is a Winter Hag? I mean, besides it just being a type of hag, I just want to see if there's like anything lore-wise we need to know. I haven't really done very many hags in Undune. That's like one of the creature types, or one of the villain types that never appeared in All Hell Yogg, was like a good hag, you know? Come on. They control weather. Interesting. Sorry, waiting for it to load on my phone. Let's get off the Wi-Fi. That might make it go faster. I don't think they exist in 5e. Winter Hag, Winter Hag. Sadistic crones who haunt winter-blasted plains and rime-covered forests. They're exceptionally arrogant and often use their magic to subjugate entire tribes of evil humanoids. Not so great. So they can rule over them as queens. These arrangements rarely last more than a few seasons because no creature is truly safe from a winter hag's irrepressible appetite for warm, raw flesh. An ambitious winter hag might extort a village by causing constant snowfall until they give her children to eat or adults to become her slaves. They have snow vision. They can see well in snowy conditions, which is pretty dumb. Ice walking. They can walk on ice. An ice staff. Hour-long ritual to create a staff made out of black ice. It's as hard as steel and functions as a +2 frost quarterstaff. Cast Cone of Cold. Oh, they have a breath weapon. Huh. In 3E, the one I'm reading. So a lot of spell-like abilities, you know, kind of like an evil Elsa. So they're Fae, right? The way the Fae work on Dune is that they're basically like magically irradiated creatures. I posted a thread about this the other day, or a tweet about this the other day, about how like Fae are really hard to define. And somebody replied, one of our followers, Traveler Farlander, replied with this really great summary that I thought, like, I can't kind of get out of my head. They described Fae as living stories, which really fascinated me. Because they're so folkloric, and because they so often, like, don't make sense in, like, a scientific way, right? Or even in, like, a magical way. I really kind of latched onto that. So I wonder what the, like, a Burhag has an ice walk ability and cold spells, yeah. So I wonder how do we play with that idea? Yeah. So like, how do we? What's the story of the Winter Hag, right? Because I like the idea of the Fae are essentially like stories come to life, like if almost American Gods style rules, right? If a story is told enough, maybe in certain areas where there's like a high concentration of magic, it basically manifests this thing, you know. The Cryad, the story is, you know, don't go wandering off into the blizzard because this thing might get you. So let me clear this out. I want to talk about like what is the folk tale at the heart of the Winter Hag? What if it's like a Hansel and Gretel thing? What if it's like the opposite of a hospitality story? You know, what if the Winter Hag, as opposed to being like, you know, I'm cold and I live in the cold, what if the Winter Hag represents warmth and protection from the elements, right? That like the Winter Hag lives in a hut or a cabin or something in like, again, I'm kind of thinking Icewind Dale right now, but you know, this could work here, where it like lures people in because of the warmth. It's not about how cold she is, it's about how she offers safety and security and then she eats you. Like it's about the notion of a tale that's the opposite of hospitality. It's like a warning to the person traveling, don't trust your host, right? Like the kind of story of why hospitality is important. And usually about the dangers of ice and snow that is alluring to others or makes the skin bluish or look pinkish. That's interesting, Jose. Yeah. I like the idea of it being that the winter is the thing that she shuts out. Like, she's not like an ice creature necessarily. She's like a creature of like warmth and soup, you know, and blankets and stuff like that. She has this kind of grandmotherly thing. Maybe she's at heart a cold creature, but what she offers is like protection from the elements, you know?
I'm just trying to think of, like, what's the story? What's the fairy tale that surrounds the winter hag? And it can't just be like, she's cold and she'll get you, because who cares, right? And, like, how are hags different from other fae, right? They have a tendency to group together in D&D, right? In these covens. Do winter hags do that? Are winter hags coven-like? Living story. What is the myth of the winter hag? What is the story behind a winter hag? Is it a creature of spoiled hospitality? What I like about that is it's a very dwarven idea that, like, don't invite guests. Ooh, what if you flip it around? What if instead of... Ooh. Yeah. What if instead of it being Hansel and Gretel, right? And, like, because in the Hansel and Gretel story, the witch, you know, you're the guest. You're Hansel or Gretel. You're the kids, and you're wandering the forest, and you're lost, and you show up at the witch's house, and she invites you in, right? Jose says, you can always go with the Dresden Universe Fae, where the Winter Court Monarch is in charge to reign those things that bump in the night without reason. It's all about order. That's interesting. Yeah, I wonder if there's, like, some kind of hierarchy we do with the hags in particular. The idea I'm playing with is that the winter hag, if these are creatures that kind of arise as a result of the folk tales of the places that they're told, right? So, like, if this is a creature that lives in Khûm and it's born out of folk tales, then it would be born out of, like, again, the sort of what is Colville calls it, the forays and the folkways and mores or whatever, right? Like the cultural touchstones of the dwarves. So my idea is that she's not the person that you go to, she's the one who comes to you. Dwarves are inherently suspicious of guests, and they have the opposite mentality that most sort of medieval cultures had about guests and hospitality. They view guests as inherently suspicious. So the winter hag is like the definition. It's the story about the person you shouldn't let into your house because they're dangerous, right? Oh, great. Thanks, Christopher. Yeah, Jose, you're exactly right. That's what I'm thinking. It's totally beating the beast, right? But I think it's the opposite. I think it's not about inviting her in, it's about rejecting her, right? You're supposed to do that. But the dwarves wouldn't want you to. She tests you to offer hospitality, but you're not supposed to offer hospitality in dwarven society. If they're not a member of the clan, you don't let them in. That's the lesson. And so letting her in is the dangerous part, right? This person comes to you and she's like weak, or she's whatever. Maybe she garbs herself in the guise of a member of your clan, right? I like the idea that she's like a dwarven hag, you know? It's always in winter, and it's always at a time when someone might come to your door asking, like, you know, I need shelter, I need help. Yeah. She comes, let me put it under culture. I don't know if she's disguised or not, because I like the idea of there being a touchstone that you can recognize. Like, if they have this, then that's how you know they might be a hag. She comes to the hold, begging entry, like in the deepest of winter. Begging entry. And I love the idea that, like, she's born out of sort of dwarven folktale, but she is just as deadly to halflings or elves or anyone else who lives there. She doesn't just go to dwarves, but that's where the stories began, right? Of this woman, this winter hag, begging entry. If you permit her entry, it brings bad luck, or it invites an evil spirit, or it invites an evil spirit inside. Like, what does she do once she gets in your hold? Because if you go to her house, then she's kind of in control. But if you let her in, what does she do to, like... And again, it has that... Ooh, it's got to have that vampire rules, for sure. Redesign. Forbiddance, I think it's called, right? She cannot enter a structure, a space, without... How does that written? But she definitely has forbiddance, right? Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. I like that, Jose, that they're very, it's like there's like 5 or 6 different things that you can tell. Like the food starts to taste bad, or yeah, the fire goes out when she enters the room, or something like that, right? That like there are a handful of little folkloric things that you can tell. That's cool. And what I like about this too is that like it's almost kind of a warning against too big of a clan. Because if you have a small clan, then you wouldn't like be able to, you could look at her and say like, I don't know her, you're not a member of our clan, right? But for a larger clan, it's easier for Winter Hag to get in because you're not going to know every single person, right? Yeah, she can disguise herself, I think, and most hags can do that, right? They can kind of mask their appearance. Yeah, so the vampire, I just want to see how it's phrased. Can enter a residence without an invitation from one of its occupants. Yeah. Enter a residence without an invitation from one of its occupants. One of its occupants, not residents. Occupants. In her entry, it brings bad luck or invites an evil spirit. And so yeah, what happens when she comes in? Like, she appears. She can disguise herself. Thrice to make her go if you invite her, and every dwarf home is taught that this is the first lessons from memory. Yeah, she's got like a Rumpelstiltskin style name. Ooh, I like that a lot. That she has a specific name. I feel so fey. Yeah, she can disguise herself to appear as any humanoid. So let's actually just call this design, because this is a new monster. Disguise self. I think what she does is she makes it cold. Like, while within the hold, no one can get warm. The whole place, like the forges, ooh, David has a good question. I'm also interested in whose doorstep she tends to show up on. Like, is it random or does she have a type? That's a great question. Go cold. Ooh, the water kettle stop whistling. The water freezes. Everyone must start making checks against exhaustion. So then, like, she's encouraged to stay in disguise. In disguise. Dwarf toes begin to freeze. Yeah, that's cool. She's encouraged to stay in disguise and slowly sap. Yeah, shows breath. Yeah. Slowly sap the strength of everyone inside. Ooh, because I like the cannibalism thing, right? Is a very hag idea. I like the idea of something about frostbite, that she eats frostbitten limbs or toes, right? That's like her favorite meal. She can only eat them if they're frostbitten. She eats frostbitten flesh. Yeah, that's cool. Recognizable by a number of folkloric signs. It feels like a sidebar. Like if this was in the monster manual, they'd be like, these are the things you can recognize her by. Signs. Breath in the air. Frozen fingers and toes. shivering. Like, I want them to be, like, yeah, a little weirder. Water kettles is interesting. Stop whistling. They should be, like, kind of, yeah, like the fires burn low. Things like that, right? So thinking about David's question, who does she go after? I think that, like, the trick with it is that if you invite her in, right? Food goes hard or musty. Yeah, that's interesting. If you invite her in, and then bad stuff starts to happen, it would be very clear right away who it is, right? And it can't be that she disguises herself as someone that you know. That doesn't work, because then it's not about letting in a stranger, and that's what the parable is, right? The parable is about letting in a stranger. I mean, it could just be, like, letting in anyone, that you're suspicious of anyone. But I think it's got to be, like, someone you don't personally know, right? I wonder what the thing about the name. Name. In order to banish her, you must say her name 3 times. She has one particular name, a la Rumpelstiltskin. You must repeat. What I like about the Fae too is that, like, their motives don't have to make any sense. They're gonna make, like, story sense, but they don't have to, like, you know, yeah, she eats frostbitten toes, but why? She just does. She's a monster. Who cares, right? Yeah, that's cool. Maybe if dwarves have a tent outside. I'm trying to think, like, why would she... Who is she going after? I kind of think that it's just about, like... I think maybe it's, like, targeting weakness, that, like, dwarven weakness, right? Clans that are too permissive, clans that allow, you know, outsiders in, like, during refugee crises and stuff like that, right? When, like, dwarves are taking other dwarves in, she will appear in situations like that, almost like smallpox in a blanket, right? Like, she's always like a parasite that hides in large groups of people that they permit inside. She could show up on her own, but because that would be very suspicious, she tends to smuggle herself into these groups, right? Yeah. Okay, I love it. I think that's really cool. Let's talk about her history. So, because she's Fae, I don't really feel like... During the Seven Sorrows, it makes sense to me that, like, the Winter Hag all but vanished during this period. But vanished during this period. There were no dwarves or inhabitants of Khûm. No one to steal the warmth from. She finds grandiosity for those who look for the praise in others. Ancient history. She's an old folktale. A warning against allowing strangers into your hold. There was a real incident, like a saboteur, right? A real incident. A saboteur who snuck into a dwarven hold. Like, inspired by a real incident. So that's kind of what's interesting, right? Is that, like, there was probably in ancient history a story, a real thing that happened. Some dwarven hold got sabotaged by somebody sneaking in, posing as a member of the clan, and then they started to tell the story that, oh, it was actually this supernatural creature, and that by telling that story so many times, it eventually made that creature real, right? And that's kind of how the Fae work in Ondune. Snuck into a dwarven hold, and by attributing that story to a supernatural creature, it made her real. Present day, as the story is retold again in Khûm, the Winter Hag returns as though she never missed a day. So the hooks here are kind of obvious, right? Like, Winter Hag infiltrates a hold and causes chaos, right? I'm trying to think of, like, other hooks. You know, besides just that, besides the obvious one of she sneaks in and eats frostbitten flesh. Yeah, mashed up reasons and details. I think that's cool. I like that notion of, like, taking actual folklore and then making it into magic. That's how real folklore works, is that, like, hey, there's this thing that happened a long time ago, right? And it's misremembered and told in this different way. And because of the nature of the magic of this world, that it makes that come true, right? I don't know, I gotta think of some hooks here. I mean, you could approach this same hook a couple different directions, right? You could do one hook where a character is accused of being a Winter Hag. Yeah, like when the characters visit a neighboring hold, another hold, they're accused. So that's a good question. What do you do when you find one? How do you get rid of them? You just say their name 3 times? Because it feels to me like if that's all you have to do, they find her in an abandoned house, which offers information of history. Yeah, but I don't think she exists except to infiltrate. I think when she's not infiltrating, she's not real. She's not there. She only exists in that threat, right? Like, because I think if you just had to say her name 3 times, and that name was just Rumpelstiltskin or whatever, and everyone knew it, then whenever you accepted anyone in, you would say the name 3 times, right? And then banish them. I like that as like a cultural practice, that maybe that's a thing that certain holds do, right? When they accept someone in, is they have somebody, like, say that. I mean, maybe that's the point, is that none of the current dwarves remember to do that. Yeah. So, like, she stopped existing for a long time because people, yeah, like, they internalize that story, right? Of like, yeah, when someone comes to your house, you say Rumpelstiltskin 3 times, just to make sure that they're not the Winter Hag, right? And that, like, she melts, I think is her thing, or whatever, right? Because that's very witch, right? This became common practice, and she essentially went extinct, right? Maybe preyed on humans. When the dwarves returned, they've forgotten this tradition. And this permits the Winter Hag to return again. I think that they're not really creatures, they're ideas. You know, like the Winter Hag is a physical manifestation of, like, mistrust. The threat is infiltration, which is cool because it's a very, like, John Carpenter, like, The Thing sort of a feeling, right? Infiltration. The Winter Hag can use her icy powers to weaken and eventually consume her prey. But the real threat, you just say or spell her own name, yeah, maybe. But the real threat is the distrust she sows. And, like, oh, this is cool too, because, like, if people catch wise to it, they won't accept people in, and that will drive more people to be out on the drive that, like so let's say you're a bunch of dwarves, right, and you're kicked out of your hole, there's some problem, you're fleeing to a nearby hole to seek shelter. The people there are suspicious of the winter hag, and so they don't let you in. And now all of these people are out there in the wilderness, and they freeze to death, and that's exactly what she wants. She is breeding the suspicion that she wants, so that way she has more victims, right? The real threat is the distrust she sows among the dwarven people. So we need one more hook. Yeah, I mean, a bunch dwarven refugees are refused entry for suspicion that they're winter hags. Yeah, great. Cool, I really like that, you guys. It feels so folktale, right? Which I think is awesome. Okay, cool, winter hag, done. Bingo, that's another one. All right, 710, we can probably squeeze out at least, definitely one more, maybe two more if we're quick here. Aboleth, Black Pudding, Cave Bear. All right, this is your last chance. I'm going to roll one. If I don't see it in the next 3 minutes, a suggestion in the next 3 minutes, I'm going to roll, and that's going to be that. How many do we have left now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Exactly 20. That's perfect for me to roll. Okay, 1 minute to make a suggestion, or else here we go with the dice roller. I'm ready. I'm ready. Mustard jelly it is. Okay, let's solve this jelly problem that we have. This jelly problem. Okay. So the MM has both. Has the mustard and the ochre. They're both under oozes. Let me go to O for ooze. Yeah, oozes are strange. Ooh, wargs are good too. So let's do this. Let's see if we can get through mustard jelly and wargs. Okay. Oozes. So the ochre jelly is in here. The ochre jelly is listed as yellowish blobs that can slide under doors and through narrow cracks in pursuit of creatures to devour. They have enough bestial cunning to avoid large groups of enemies. An ochre jelly follows at a safe distance as it pursues its meal. Its digestive enzymes dissolve flesh quickly, but have no effect on other substances such as bone, wood, and metal. Kills its prey slowly. Some varieties. But now the mustard jelly. Ooh, wait a minute though. I think we actually have our answer to the mustard jelly and the ochre jelly. I have to go get another document here. But I think we know the answer to this, David. And I think, if you remember from months ago, it was your idea. Bum, bum, bum. What a twist. So, we talked about a long time ago. Apologies if I'm getting a little laggy. I'm opening up some documents on my computer and it tends to mess with my stream. So, apologies. We talked about a cave. A particular cave in a particular part of Khûm. Let me see if I can pull it up here. 1 second, everybody. I'm looking through my big, messy pile of notes. Yes, David. Yes. It wasn't gas, but it was acid, right? We talked about this, like, weird, slightly too intelligent kind of acid. Oh, yeah, we called it Kavod Onatinve, which means Cavern 51 in Dwarven. Here, I will copy it over. Okay. So let's go. We're going to call it ochre jelly because I think that's more interesting. We could talk about maybe what the mustard jelly is if it's something different. Oh, no, it'd be a little higher. So Oriad and ooze gray. Ochre jelly. So here's what I have for the location. Kavod Onatinve, which is Cavern 51. It's an acid cave filled with sulfuric acid. The dwarves struck acid while carving out the stoneway underneath Krosvadad, which is the volcano in the center of Khûm. The chamber began to fill with acid and was thus sealed off. And then here's 3 details about it. There's a stoneway detour in a certain area near Krosvedad, where the acid was contained, discovered by Kovgar the Grand. It is a tremendous hassle. While contained, for now, miners who maintain the seal speak of how clever the acid is, how it always finds some way to sneak past the wards. While the acid has rested perfectly contained for 500 years, it's only a matter of time before an unknowing party accidentally unleashes it. So I think we make this acid the ochre jelly, right? That it's like goopy and it's ooze-like, and they found basically like a spring. They sprung acid, you know, like kind of like bursting a main. So we call this ochre jelly. Take this description of it. It's funny that it's right by the gray ooze. But yeah, David, that was originally your idea, the acid. So I'm glad we're finding a place for it. Summary. A semi-intelligent form of acid. The ochre jelly is contained. Ochre jelly is contained for the moment, but seeks a means to free itself from the prison. It's kind of like a microcosm of Yogg, right? That the dwarves have sealed it within. We have kind of an ooze associated with Yogg already. A couple of them, if you count Smudge. Description. Yellowish, acidic ooze. The ochre jelly is strangely clever, capable of learning and adapting to new challenges it confronts. Right, so the idea was that like the dwarves used a certain kind of steel to prevent it from they closed off the tunnels with a certain kind of steel, and then it slowly started to eat its way through, and like, okay, well, we'll acid proof the steel, and then it found a way to like worry at the bolts or something, right? That it's this like kind of vaguely intelligent acid that is slowly trying to find its way out of this imprisonment. Again, like, I like it as a tiny little microcosm for Yogg. Capable of learning and adapting to the conditions it's placed under. What is I keep doing this, I keep opening up the book and then closing it. What are the ochre jelly's actual like powers, I wonder? That seems important to know. Ochre jelly. It's amorphous as spider climb. Oh, it splits. This is the one that like you attack it and it splits into various different parts. Okay, cool. It's thick, yellow, goopy. It is somewhat resistant to slashing damage, instead capable of fracturing into smaller pieces of ooze, but all driven by the same purpose. Yeah, that's cool. So ancient history, it lay dormant for a long time. But was eventually discovered by Kovgar the Grand and sealed off. The idea was that it was like a hassle during the Stoneways construction, right? Yeah, cool. During the Seven Sorrows, when the dwarves abandoned Khûm, they forgot all knowledge of the cavern of the acid sealed within Kabod Ona Tinve Cavern 51. Let's see. The acid has bided its time, ready for an unsuspecting dwarf. Suspecting dwarven team, unsuspecting dwarven prospector to open the seal and free it. And free it from its imprisonment. Yeah, it's just Yogg, right? It's just like a tiny little... It's not Yogg. It's not from Yogg, but I love it as a like symbol for Yogg. Hooks. The characters find old plans from Kavgra discussing the ooze. Call it like the substance, right? You know, a dwarf inadvertently frees it. A dwarf inadvertently frees it. Advertently opens the sealed chamber and unleashes the jelly. And then there's got to be one about like, because it's underneath Krosvedon, which is like the big volcano, and it's kind of the central meeting point of it. So I think that like there's a collapse at Krosvedon. The chambers below. Let's see, there's a collapse, there's a structural collapse at Krosvedon thanks to the acid, right? It's like eating away at the stone. Ooh, yeah, that's interesting. Let's maybe do that too. There's a structural collapse at Krosvedon. The acid eating away at the stone above. The jelly has some alchemical purpose that an enterprising figure is after. Cool, I like that. Yeah, I think it's basically a combat threat. Like overwhelm. The acid, while intelligent, seeks only to flow. When contained, like its intelligence comes from the fact that it was contained. It's acid wash jeans, man. That's a great hook. Its intelligence comes from its imprisonment. Let it loose, and it will flatten all of Khûm. It'll just keep rolling, right? Once it just like wrap around the earth. Okay, great. Boom. That was really fast. Nice job. That took like 12 minutes. Let's do wargs. Wargs. So let's look at what they say for wargs. They traditionally, of course, have their sort of relationship with goblins. Wargs are one of my favorite D&D monsters, actually. I don't know why. I've always really liked them in Tolkien. I especially liked that, like, the implication that they have their own language, right? They're like intelligent wolves. Wargs. So they're in here. There's not a lot about them in the MM, if I remember correctly. They're kind of just like grouped in with the beasts. But I think they're technically monstrosities. Yeah, they call them warg with an O. Warg. An evil predator that delights in hunting and devouring creatures weaker than itself. Cunning and malevolent wargs roam across the remote wilderness or are raised by goblins and hobgoblins. Those creatures use wargs as mounts, but a warg will turn on its rider if it feels mistreated or malnourished. Wargs speak their own language and goblin, and a few learn to speak common as well. I love wargs. So goblins are a little different in Ondune than they are in other places. I mean, they're basically goblins. I have a thing where they basically are like culture thieves. That goblins are kind of like children playing grown-up, that they will cleave themselves to nearby other intelligent civilizations. So they don't really have a civilization of their own. So goblins that are near dwarves will try to pretend kind of to be dwarves. They'll start mining and making things, right? Goblins near humans will start to have like economies and trade and stuff like that. Goblins near elves will try to practice magic and live in the trees, right? That they kind of adapt themselves to whatever culture's in nearby. They're sort of like weird parasites almost. So I'm thinking about decoupling wargs from goblins because I don't necessarily think that they don't have the kind of marauding culture that they would need to have wargs. But I think we could attach the wargs to the orcs. So my orcs are also very different. As with all races on Dune, well, I guess I shouldn't say all because of Yogg. But orcs are not naturally evil any more than goblins are. Orcs are one of the three kind of primal races, one of the primordial races of On Dunes between the dwarves, the elves, and the orcs. They are deeply spiritual people. They live in great sort of tribes. They are very connected to nature, almost more so than any other race, whereas like elves are very much connected to trees and the forest and plants. Dwarves are connected to stone. Orcs are connected to beasts and animals. And so they're all about hunting and they're all about herding. They're kind of like nomadic, herding, very like collectivist people. They're all about the tribe. They're all about their numbers, right? But they're all about hunting, and they have a thing in their culture. They're kind of like the guiding principle of of orcish culture is that they don't use any material that didn't come from an animal. So they view the earth basically as being completely sacred and sacrosanct, and that you can't scar the earth or cut down trees or do anything like that. But they view the animals, the beasts, as being their equals. So orcs don't see themselves as being above a deer. They are the same as the deer, right? They're related to the deer or the bear or the hyena or the ape or the owl or whatever it is, right? They've even made their 6 gods are just animals. So, you know, boar is the strength god, and deer is the dexterity god, or stag is the dexterity god, and I think hyena is the constitution god, ape is the intelligence god, owl is the wisdom god, and wolf is the charisma god. It's about the pack, right? So I could see them having a thing with wargs where if the wargs are intelligent wolves and they view the wolves as being almost one of the gods, you could basically port over the goblin warg relationship to orcs and wargs. You wouldn't make wargs evil anymore, but I could see them being sort of like a partner people to the orcs. There are orcs that live in Khûm. They are somewhat rarer now because of the sort of affliction, because of the 7 sorrows, but they were invited to come live in Khûm way in the past, in like early recorded history, by a dwarven queen who needed more muscle in a war that she was losing. She invited an orcish tribe to come and live in Khûm. So there are some other creatures they brought with them. They brought elk, they brought other animals that they herded. So it could make sense that the wargs would be tied to that too. That's kind of what I'm thinking, because wargs are so sort of dependent on their relationship to other creatures. Yeah, orcs look at wargs like the stewards of nature. Like, I kind of think like the warg, it's a little similar to the Xorn, but I kind of think it's something like that, right? Where like they would view the wargs as their brothers, you know, as their siblings. So brought to Khûm by ancient orcs. The wargs, but like, what's their deal? Like, what, like, by ancient orcs? Because the wargs aren't animals, you know, they're intelligent, or intelligent-ish. They would have a society of some sort, right? It might be a sort of base or primitive society if they have like low intelligence. You have 7 intelligence, so they're not incredibly smart, but they speak their own language, right? And a few of them can learn to speak common, it specifically says. So they're not dumb. They have their own culture, their own society, right? I mean, they're less intelligent, obviously, than there's also the Winter Wolf I don't have on my list. Huh. Interesting. Well, wait a minute. What if we combined them? Because the Winter Wolf has the cold breath, right? Let's talk about wargs to start with, and then I think maybe the Winter Wolf could be an offshoot, although they're much bigger. Winter Wolves also could just be, you know... Oh, maybe they're tied to frost giants. I don't know. We'll get there. I'm getting off. Used to reign over nature and frown upon buildings and towns, whatever treads over plants. Yeah, I think how the orcs are like that, right? Like the wargs. I like them. Obviously, they're not evil. We decouple that. They can be, you know, in conflict with humans and with sort of the sort of standard races, the standard ancestries, because they are so natural, right? They are like sentient wolves. They'd be very pack focused, right? They'd be very family oriented. Why are they teaming up with orcs? So they get here and see other beings building and existing. They try to rein them close or small, like containing a danger. That's interesting. Because like an orc would see a warg. Ooh, yeah. The orcs and wargs have an ancient partnership. The wargs taught the orcs to hunt and herd. The orcs taught the wargs to speak. So it's like Mowgli, right? Like the orcs, when they were first made, were soft and weak and like easy prey for the animals that lived in Oros. They're originally from Oros, which is the central continent that eventually becomes Yawgmoth. But Oros is sort of like a prehistoric paradise. Like all the animals in Oros are massive, dire versions of themselves, right? It's like Indricatheres and giant beavers and giant sloths and that kind of stuff, right? It's all these massive animals. And so the idea that the orcs, when they were first made or first came into being, were like woefully ill-equipped to deal with this, right? But the wargs, Mowgli style, took them in and raised them, right? That like the orcs were literally raised by wolves culturally, like in their myth. And so that's why the wolf god is one of their gods, maybe their most important god, because the wargs took them in. The wargs knew how to hunt, even though they were smaller and not nearly as big. The wargs had teamwork and cooperation and could hunt down. Maybe wargs are just the native wolves of Oros. Yeah, that's cool. So in Oros, the wolves developed intelligence in response to the massive prey animals they encountered there. In the rest of the world, wolves are unintelligent, are like non-sentient. But here in Oros, they needed advanced teamwork to take down these massive creatures. The wargs saw orcs as pitiful and chose to raise them and teach them the ways of the hunt. The notion that like there are no unintelligent wolves in Oros. They're all wargs is cool. And that it's like a geographical distinction. This one continent has just intelligent wolves in it instead of regular wolves. If you find wolves in Rubicos, they're regular wolves. But here in Oros, they're specifically wargs because they've evolved to be wargs. And what I like about the Mowgli thing is that feels, again, very folkloric. That's the story that the orcs tell. It's unclear exactly what their original relationship was, but I like the idea that the orcs needed the wargs to teach them to be more like animals, and that the wargs needed the orcs to teach them to be more like people. That, like, the wargs couldn't speak, but they were taught how to speak by the orcs. It came much more naturally to the orcs. The orcs learned how to be beasts, how to act like beasts. The wargs learned how to act like people. So that's like a big top-down look at wargs. And so they have this partnership, right? I think that they tend to live together. You get warg packs and orc tribes that like knit. You know, maybe there's even like a cultural thing about like a bond, right? That like orcs will, you know, the alpha warg will bond with I think the term is the Throck, is the leader of an orcish horde. So it's like a warg pack and an orcish tribe will meld. That's kind of cool. You know, and you get orc tribes that don't have wargs. You get warg packs that don't have orc tribes. But, like, a lot of times you will see them kind of in concert. I think that's cool. So then in Khûm, right, there's a particular... when the orcs came to Khûm, they brought wargs with them. They brought wargs with them. For a long time, they hunted. I like your idea, Jose, about the wargs, like, kind of seeing... Yeah, that's cool. Let's talk about history for a second. So, the orcs were, upon arriving, the orcs were content to hunt and herd and live in the tundras. But the wargs were disgusted by the, like, settlement, right? I like the idea that the wargs are a little bit more natural, a little bit more bestial, and so they see civilization, as you're suggesting, Jose, as more of a danger than the orcs do. That, like, if the orcs raid, maybe it's, like, put on them by the wargs. The wargs aren't evil, but they see farms, and they see buildings, and they see towns and settlements as being dangerous. They're not as concerned about the dwarves who are, like, high up in the mountains don't bother the wargs as much, and they're much harder to assault. But these human towns, right, these human settlements that are starting to crop up in Khûm present a real danger to the wargs. So they're not a danger, but they see it as sacrilege, right? They are, like, the notion of the orcs teaching the wargs, hey, this is our religion, and the wargs taking it more to heart than the orcs do is interesting to me. That, like, the wargs are like the radicalizing influence on the orcs. I think that's cool. We're disgusted by the settlement. They pushed the orcs to raid with them, and the orcs were occasionally, like, persuaded. I don't think the orcs are raiding people, but I think that they would occasionally do it, right? And I like the idea that the warg is the kind of spur there. That's the, like, inspiring factor. That's neat. So then during the Seven Sorrows, when the orcs... So the orcs during the Seven Sorrows can't really hack it. They can't really deal with all the disasters that fall upon Khûm. And so they fracture. One group of them becomes the Grimlocks and then go underground, and one group of them sort of becomes permanent lycanthropes. Like, because lycanthropy is an orcish, like, ritual. It's an orcish... it was originally kind of designed as, like, a weapon. They would turn themselves into beasts and then throw themselves into war against each other. So some of them kind of become permanent lycanthropes, and some of them go underground. But when the orcs fractured under the Sorrows, the wargs thrived. The coming of the snows drove the humans away and gave that territory to the wargs. So the wargs, I think, the wargs are numerous and prevalent and see the return of humanity to Khûm as an invasion. With shorter lifespans, they see, like none of the wargs, no wargs, all the wargs that dwell in Khûm, like, none of the wargs that dwell in Khûm remember a time when humans existed. Like, remember a time when humans dwelt here. They are foreign invaders. So I love the notion of, like, nations of wargs seek a means to drive them out. So like warg moots and stuff like that, right? These like packs coming together and organizing this campaign, this war against these humans coming in, seeing them as taking over their land, right? If they live as long as wolves, you know, it's a much shorter lifespan to a human. So 500 years passes is a goofy amount of time for a human, right? Not maybe so much a dwarf, but a human. You know, the United States has only been around for 200 some years, so twice the length of the United States' existence, right? In the 1500s for us, right, is how long Khûm has been off the map. The wargs, that would be thousands of years, right? It would feel like all of warg history, essentially. So they see this as an invasion, these people coming in and building houses, even though it's like relatively minor. You know, whatever wargs lived on the borders near the kind of human settlements near Port Sumter and stuff like that would view this as this act of aggression, and they would try to like seek. I love the idea of like politics between these wolf like nations. I think is like, again, way more complex than you normally see with wargs, right? Wargs are almost always just done as like slavering brutes, but if they have language and they have history, you know, it's all oral history or whatever. And it's like a simpler society because their needs are relatively few. They don't build, they don't, you know, construct, they don't write. But they obviously have to have culture. So let's see, hooks. Wargs gather in a ferocious warg moot to debate war against humanity. Wargs raid shipping lanes. Seeking to starve the humanoid communities. I love the idea of like the wargs needing a spokesperson. To argue their case in, you know, like human society. I like the idea the threat is war. The wargs will defend their lands against what they view as a human incursion. A human incursion. Yeah, that's really interesting. Sorry, I like wargs. I don't know if you could tell. Cool. Oh, and also, I have this order wrong. The warg would go after the winter hag now that it's an O. We have 15 minutes. Do we think we can do another monster in 15 minutes? What do you guys think? I'm kind of thinking about calling it, because I don't want to get like halfway into a monster, you know? What do y'all think? Is there one we could do really quickly? Maybe we'll do Dark Mantles. I have a pretty good idea on the Dark Mantle. Oh, we did the mustard and the ochre jelly. Boom. Yeah, let's do Dark Mantle really quick, because I feel like I have a good handle on that. And then that's 5 monsters, I think. Yeah, let's do Dark Mantle. We got 15 minutes. We can do it. I'm kind of getting some flow right now, which is not a thing that happens to me very often when I work. I'm a very, like, sometimes I can, like, hyper-focus, but I'm also kind of a distractible person. Like, I have to do, like, 5 minutes on something and then take a break, and 5 minutes and take a break. But now I'm, like, I'm in it, right? My brain is cooking along. So let's talk about Dark Mantles. I have a basic idea of how the Dark Mantle is going to work for this game. The Dark Mantle. I don't know where they come from. That's a good question. I don't necessarily know that we need to examine where they come from too much. But my basic idea for the Dark Mantle... One second, clearing this out. Is that they're aberrations, right? I feel like I have this thing where anything with tentacles I immediately assume is an aberration. Maybe that's not fair to other things, like to just like a regular octopus is not an aberration. It's just a regular ass octopus. Dark Mantle. It's a monstrosity. Okay. It's weird. I mean, look at it. Come on. That's an aberration. It's got like 6 eyes and tentacles, and it like summons darkness. Come on now. So, I'm calling them aberrations. I don't care. Small aberrations that dwell in the deepest places underground. Dark mantles drop from the ceiling to capture their prey and puppet them like and control them like puppets. I would say puppet them like puppets. So I'm gonna do basically like a brain slug thing, right? So normally what happens with the dark mantle, right, is it like it comes down and envelops you in darkness and it wraps you up with the tentacles or whatever. I like the idea of like weird cultists, people that go, that like miners that are down below, that get like grabbed by the dark mantle and it goes over their head like a hood, and then it's able to kind of like take control of their body. So you would see these like strange creatures with these brain slugs sort of half on their heads, almost like head crabs, whatever, right, from Half-Life. And I think that's a little bit more interesting than just like it jumps down and tries to eat you. Because then like what is the Dark Mantle's goal? Why do they do that? What is the purpose of doing it, right? They feel like they have to be kind of Yogg adjacent. There's so many Yogg related things down here though. It makes me a little bit hesitant to do it. I kind of think it's more interesting if they're just weird and no one understands much about them. Once a Dark Mantle takes control, because again, it's the name mantle is right in there. It feels like it has to kind of fit over your head, right? Sort of like a face hugger. Takes control of its host. What does it do? What is the Dark Mantle's goal? Needs to be something obscure. I don't think that it's like, it shouldn't be anything too obviously like, oh, we're trying to resurrect Yogg or something. Like, I think it's cooler if it's weirder. If the Dark Mantles aren't associated with Yogg, they're just like some weird creature that lives underground. Maybe they're from another dimension, but I don't think we're getting too hung up on like origin stuff. Like, are they collecting weird items? You know? They collect strange things. They perform strange rites. Does the Dark Mantle feed on the host's like brain activity or something, right? Sorry, my wife's making food in the background. I used to do Dark Mantles where they would envelop the head, and then they would like give you like horrifying visions of like distant Lovecraftian vistas. So you could still do that, right? Like they could still, once enveloped, they could still be like seeing things, you know, in distant realms. What does a Dark Mantle's victim see beneath the hood? I just think there's something like spooky about seeing like a dwarf with like a horrible squid face hugger like wrapped around his neck, right? And as he breathes, the like thing, like the face hugger, right? Like, and it's got eyes that are looking in all different directions, and it's maybe like kind of lopsided. It's not perfectly on there, you know. There's a Rick and Morty episode that does a similar thing with like the face huggers. Do they have their own society? Do they lay eggs inside the person? These are all just questions, you know, important questions. I kind of think it's all a mystery. I don't think we need to know. I think it's something we can address when it comes up. I like the idea of it being a scary thing, but it's not clear what they would do with the, you know, that there are maybe these like weird little pockets of them. Because it's kind of like the Myconids. We talked about that a little bit. But if the notion with a Dark Mantle is, you know, you kill it right away, none of the dwarves really know what happened to them. Sometimes they encounter dwarves or like miners or lost explorers or whatever with these dark mantles on their heads, but it's not known to dwarven society what the dark mantles want, why they would do that, what do they gain from it. I mean, again, I feel like we kind of do the same historical point here, right? That they existed and then they didn't exist. They either like diminished during the Seven Sorrows or increased during the Seven Sorrows, and that's that. Like, is there some way we can play with it? Like, it kind of reminds me of the Roper, right? The Roper we talked about being only a thing now. Like, it never existed before. Yeah, there were no Ropers in historical Khûm. Only around the Sorrows and the earthquakes that shook Khûm before the volcano exploded did the first Ropers creep in. They're now prevalent in the deep places of Khûm, watching and reporting on the movements of the dwarves. So is it a similar thing with the Dark Mantles? Like, did the Dark Mantle... You can't do the opposite. You can't say they used to exist and now they don't, because then why design them? You could do the same. You could say that they didn't exist and now they do, but that seems to imply that they're kind of Yogg associated. I'm trying to think of a good like hook here, a good story. I like it being mysterious. I like them not knowing what they're up to or why, and that they're not associated with Yogg. I think that's kind of important. They could be, but it just feels like so many things are. Having like the odd monster that's separated from that is maybe important. So let's do some hooks, and then we come back to history. Miners are disappearing in the lower tunnels, leaving no trace. Like, while on watch, a character is possessed by a dark mantle. So redesign is a thing we should talk about. Possession. Dark mantle, once grappled, takes control of its victim. And I think it's a thing where it's not like you get saves every round, right? Until the grapple ends, you're, you know, charmed. The target is charmed, is dominated by the dark mantle. So once it happens, you're done, right? Like, until someone literally rips it off your face, which I think is interesting. Possessed by a dark mantle. So I've done creatures that are similar. I've done like facehugger style monsters, but they're always like, in that case, they were the servants. They were like basically juvenile forms of a kraken or an aboleth or whatever. And by steering them around, they were achieving the goals of like a larger entity. I kind of like the implication that maybe that's what's happening, but we don't know what that entity is. You know, maybe this is an aberration, so it's like they're tied to a different dimension, right? Like, maybe it's Hadar, maybe it's not. Maybe there's another one out there that we haven't discussed, and it's kind of shrouded in mystery and darkness. Yeah, what's interesting about it, too, is that, like, it's not like a traditional body snatcher thing where it's there's no paranoia to it. You know, if someone has a dark mantle, it's very clear. It takes over their whole head. So you don't really get those plots that are about like, ooh, are you a Cylon or not, right? Because it's very, very clear whether you are or aren't. It's more about kind of the body horror of it than it is about the paranoia. I still think the threat that they pose is functionally servitude, right? Like, the Dark Mantle want to take over... Oops. The Dark Mantle want to take over the characters' bodies and steer them towards some unknowable purpose. Some dark and unknowable purpose. I'm trying to think of another hook. Something like finding a dead dark mantle or something like that, right? Like, I mean, an obvious one is that like the characters stumble upon a cult of the dark mantle. Yeah, what if it's like an actual cult, right? And they like believe that people who are not controlled but were and are now like devoted religiously to the dark mantle. Yeah, that's cool. Though like you sometimes would like too much exposure to it, you know, makes this like you kind of can't live without it. Like, it almost becomes like addictive. It's kind of interesting. We still don't really have like a good sense of their history, you know, like were they prevalent in ancient history and now they're less prevalent? I mean, I could see them having basically been exterminated and then come back, right? That's kind of the classic, that they were hunted down in the early days. I could see it being a later thing that was introduced towards kind of the end of Khûm's history, or like Anduin's history, if it's like an outside force trying to exert influence, right? Which we kind of talked about. I think we might have to come back to the history on the Dark Mantle, because I don't know that there's anything that's really striking me right now. But yeah, I think that's good. I think we had 5 monsters today, people. Dark Mantle, we did. Dark Mantle, what am I forgetting? Now my brain is dead. I can't think. There's a Dark Mantle on my head. Oh, we did the oozes. Ooh, are some nefarious people able to train them? That's cool. Ooh, the Darrow. Yes, that's smart. Hey, UberQ, good thinking. I think you guys both have it there. The Darrow. Darrow see clarity of a kind when they are under one's charm effect. Yes, that's cool. The Darrow welcome the Dark Mantle, giving them the ability to create. Yeah, that's cool. So what if it was like in ancient history, there was briefly a Dark Mantle panic, right? Kind of like a satanic panic. Some dwarves that sort of recreationally... Oh, what if it's... Yeah, that fell under the sway. Under the Dark Mantle sway. That's cool. But they were sort of purged from dwarven society. When the sorrows were really going wrong, there was one clan still secretly devoted to the Dark Mantles, right? That returned to their old ways. They remain in Khûm, sworn to their strange religion. Yeah. Are they Darrow now? But I like the idea that, like, yeah, the Darrow would welcome it because it lets them, like, the working through them, the Dark Mantle can create. Cool. Bingo. We got there, you guys. Nice. Okay. Yeah, 5 monsters. We did the Wargs, we did the Winter Hag, we did the Jorn, the Dark Mantle, and we did the Ochre Jelly. Look at that. That's pretty good. 5 monsters. There's not very many of these left. Honestly, we're kind of at this stage now with the campaign where I'm kind of reaching an event horizon where there's not a lot more online sort of world building I need to do. There's like little tiny stuff, and there's like campaign prep, but unless we actually get towards getting players in here and starting to design stuff, I don't know how much more of these particular Yeah, can you guys hear me cooking over there? How many more of these particular streams we need to accomplish? Yeah, we'll have to cross the bridge when we come to it. We're kind of coming up on the end of this bit of it, I feel like, until we actually get into the real campaign. Great. Well, thanks again, everybody, for coming. Just a few things, a few reminders for those of you who are watching later. I'm going to move my mic so it's maybe not picking up so much food. So yeah, if you enjoyed this stream, we'll be back next Saturday with another stream. I haven't quite decided what it'll be. We might do some politics stuff. There's some fiddly bits of Dwarven clan politics we haven't exactly figured out. So I might want to do a deep dive on that stuff. That's next Saturday, same time, 6 to 8. If you like this stream, you can watch there's a whole bunch of them here on the channel. I will add this one to the playlist after. Make sure that you guys check us out on Twitter. Oh, first of all, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you aren't already. You can hit that red button to do so. You can find us on Twitter. We're at XP Web Series. If you like these streams, they are supported by my Patreon, which you can find at patreon.com/XP Web Series. We just had a new patron from the YouTube community last week, which is really awesome. Yeah, great. Thanks for coming, UberQ. Thanks for coming, Jose and David and Vaughn and everybody who swung out tonight. It was awesome to see you guys. Yeah, this was a good one. Very productive. Well, yeah, check us out there. Twitter, Patreon, and here on YouTube are kind of our three big spots. But until next time, I will see you guys next week. Awesome. Thanks for coming. Have a good week. Switch screens.
Hmm.